All right, Pandemic 2.0 and Lockdown 2.0 update, and let's bring some things together so we can understand the timelines on these a little bit better. Because what we saw in those first 3 years, 5 months, and 18 days, what is that? The 1-8-35 and a little mix-up, and that 1-8-35 is connected to your king spirit. But this 3.5 years is depending what denomination you're taught and all those types of things. But this would be your so-called tribulation time frame, is where you know you're at that point. Because in 2020, they showed you that the world shut down, the crown was given to the king, while the star was shown, the trumpet for the ET and the Space Force was shown, the trumpets sounded, the peace deal was made on 1/28/2020. So there's many signs going on to show you that you started that 7-year period, okay? Now this is a wrap up of the spiritual period. There's been an overlay of things we've been discovering, and there's a spiritual into carnal as these things unfold. And the woman covered with the sun was in 2017, 9/23/24 was that day. So the 9, the 45, and the 23 on 9/11, and the 24 on 9/11 is coming in the 2024 and that 2025, okay? And that lines up with that Christmas Eve and that Christmas Day. And this also lines up with the Irish twins, for one is born a year after the other, okay? So, as the 89 on the King Spirit is this year, and it ends on 1/8/25, that is the 90th year if he was alive. So this is part 2, film edited and released in 89. So in November is when part 2 will be released onto the world stage. So this would be when that 3.5 years, 18 days starts to repeat itself on the flip-flops. And this is when we start to see this, that, and the other from China, or the books of life are opened, and the people are judged by their works, by the armies that gathered and whatever for their kings and such. So this would be that flip and flop on that. So that's where you see between November and part 3 is starting to be film edited and released, along with as Family Ties per se is being filmed also. And it's a very busy schedule for the so-called summer and all those things. But this is the sum and the ear. That's the numbers and the searing on the ears and the dark sentencing and stuff that we cover on here. So from the November, or from now till May, is when part 3 is released, the wild times, okay? So we can see where part 2 is released, and then it goes to the May Day event, all right? And that's that so-called wild time, the 23 ill and those things, and that's the W time frame. And then we see October being announced for Christmas. So this is where we can see that early release of part 2 or whatever in certain parts of the world, okay? So as part 2 is opened up, it leads to part 3, the wild time. So October, November to the May Day, and between then we have the 11/6 to the 1/19 day, the 16/11 gap for the 2 months from the voting to the market in the right hand to check yes or no to buy and sell, or it is and to worship his name and number, the 45, the 47, and the name is his way and the number is his message. Make America great again, all these things, okay? So this is the worship of the mark. You don't have any other choice but to vote for me. That's what Trump's saying. So we'll get that in a minute. The Part 3, the wild times. We can see how that 3.5 years is flip-flopped over. And we already see the lockdowns 2.0s coming in different ways, this way, shape, or form. And we see the during those 4 days of this football game, we got the shooting starting up, and that was matching the 4 days on the DNC and those types of things. And I'll be doing some updates on the 4 games and such with the things that are being switched around on those things, because Elon was caught with his so-called Eagles Pass live at the old border, so-called. Okay, so the wild times, the so-called May Day, and if it's moved up from November to October, that's where we see the May to the April, and that would tie in the 420 high holidays and the April Fool's Day and those types of things. The 1990, the part 3, that will be when you get the full-blown wild times, full-blown so-called collapse and those types of things, okay? And then we also see that succession, the succeeding is tied to the second coming and those things. And we see Texas and California talking about succession or whatever. This can be birth places for the blue and the red, in a matter of speaking, and then you have the purple come out of it, what's left over. But we'll see how these things go. And then also the Gavin has the GA and the VIN in there, and the GAV, that's the 22N, so that's tied to the you have the Gavin there versus the Georgia GA over here, kind of thing going on. But those are just some side notes. The Biff Tannen on part 1 and 2 and 3 and such, okay? We see that Biff Tannen takes a dip out at the old age 78 in 2015. He just kind of disappears, all right? And that disappears is kind of where the ID system comes in, where stuff can start unfolding, or they say, hey, you got to get a digital ID to vote, and that's part of the marking in the right hand and casting it down to the ground, and Satan casts it down to the ground. Those things where you want that mark in the right hand to paper and all those things, that paper and that PA for that ant, that custom ant. But this is tied to that, and the ID, the digital ID and all those things, this is where the mark of the beast comes in. Well, that's the mark of the beast, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but they don't understand that's the kingdom of Jesus coming on as the New World Order, and they're being shown this, that, and the other to scare them, because the image is big in life, and since Satan rules the world, he wants to scare the crap out of everybody so they don't move forward. Okay? So this is where Trump is 78 now, and that he kind of goes under the tunnel. All right, the Fox man, the 666 man, goes under the tunnel, and he lets this, that, and the other happen on earth, and then he comes back and is the begotten Son for everybody to worship and look back at the Dawn Nation. We're looking forward to that Dawn Nation, so let's look back at that Dawn Nation for that dumb mock crazy when everybody's do nuts, right? So you know why the donut has the hole in the middle? You'll find out soon enough, because Don's nuts. Okay? So there's the old part of the second coming and the old succeeding that everybody's going to start doing. So man, I got so much funny stuff going on in my head, y'all. This is really just hilarious stuff. And it is so, in such a way the so-called lights of the world, the churches of the world, or whatever, right? But they will never, ever see. If you're under these influences out there, the ones under the works, well, the first work is to believe. But Jesus says we don't need to believe in that day. Because the Father's in you and the Father in I. And we are the sons of God. We are the Christ. So Jesus taught. Not that dude over there, not Jesus the Christ. That's the sign of end times. That's the mark in the right hand to worship his name and number, his way and his message. What's the message of Jesus Christ? Well, what's the message of Paul? But Paul says don't worship the letter, but you're worshiping the letter. But they say the covenants are an allegory, but you're taking it for real. But it's a spiritual book, but we're going to read it as literal. These are 4 horsemen coming over the mountain. Jesus is coming in the clouds. There are dead people going to rise up out of the ground. We are going to be disappearing up out of here. Hallelujah. Blind leading blind is what Jesus told you. Old Testament, Jeremiah talked to the pastors. They were all wrong. Jesus comes and talks to the Pharisees and the scribes and the lawyers. Depending who you talk to, Pharisees, scribes, that's a pastor. They're all wrong. I didn't say it. Your book says it. Your book says it. So, part 2 and 3 are in alignments. And as part 2 and 3 are being released onto the world, that trumpets in 2020 sounded. There's some overlays going on here. So that 3.5 years, the spiritual time frame is the 7 years. So this is where the birth is coming a little early, and you're sitting up on that high spot, that mountain, looking down at the other mountain, like, oh man, that mountain is... So, as you're over there looking, as you're up on this other mountain, that ant mound, that other mountain, is going to war with the bees and the other ants. And that 3.5 years, depending what demon nation you grew up in, will depend on if you're pre-trib, post-trib, whatever kind of thing going on. But the point of it is 2017 to 2024, 7 years. And then you have the 2020 to the 3.5 years. And then the 3.5 years, you're in the middle time frame to pass out these last deals, to connect them all. And then that's when it breaks open again and the people are like, oh shit. And then the fundamentalists or whatever, it might take them 3.5 years or 7 years or whatever to wake up. But eventually the whole world over the next, when the part 2 is released, they were going to be looking for that 55. That 55 Chevy down by the levee. All right. So, and the Chevy Chase Bank. And I ran after it. I ran. I'm all out of gas, folks. I didn't get my streets of gold that Don sold me for my souls. His high tops to be the most high on this old mountain. And I didn't get my bricks to make my house. I just used the sticks and hay. We'll have to end it here.